My name is Clara Mayfield. For 42 years, my world was bound by the hushed reverence of the public library, a sanctuary of stories where I was the quiet keeper. I raised my son, Daniel, in a small two-bedroom apartment above a flower shop, the scent of hyacinths and rain-soaked earth a constant backdrop to our lives. His father, a man with a poet's heart and a wanderer's feet, left us when Daniel was 7, leaving behind a shelf of well-worn paperbacks and a silence that I filled with twice the love and 3 times the effort. I worked extra shifts, saved every spare dollar, and poured my life into the singular goal of giving my son the future his father had forsaken. He was my story, the one I was most proud of writing. Now, at 68, my life has found a different rhythm. Retirement brought with it a pension that was more symbolic than substantial, a quiet that was sometimes peaceful and sometimes aching, and the bittersweet joy of watching Daniel build a life I could only ever have dreamed of for him. He was a successful architect, married to Olivia, a woman who decorated her life with the same meticulous, cool precision she applied to her career in marketing. They had 2 beautiful children, Sophie and Leo, and a sprawling house in the suburbs of Cedar Creek, a house with more bathrooms than I'd had bedrooms growing up. I was a frequent visitor, the ever-reliable babysitter, the baker of birthday cakes, the quiet presence in the corner during holidays, grateful for any role they would grant me in their gleaming, fast-paced world. I told myself this was the happy ending I had worked so hard for. I just hadn't realized my chapter in the story was meant to be so short. The beginning of the end started with the mundane groan of old plumbing. A pipe burst in the wall behind my bathtub, flooding my small apartment and the florist's shop below. In a matter of hours, my quiet, ordered world was a chaotic scene of soaked carpets, warped floorboards, and the grim pronouncement that my home would be unlivable for at least a month. My first call, of course, was to Daniel. "Oh, Mom, that's awful," he'd said, his voice tinny and distracted through the phone. I could hear the familiar sounds of his life in the background, the cheerful chime of a video game, Olivia's sharp, clear voice giving an instruction. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, dear. Just a bit shaken. And homeless, it seems." I tried for a light tone, the one I always used to signal I wasn't a burden. "The landlord is putting me up in a motel for a couple of nights, but I was wondering, well, your guest room is so lovely." A pause stretched between us, thick with unspoken calculations. Mom, that's not really a guest room anymore." Olivia turned it into her Peloton studio. "There's barely room to walk in there now." "Oh," I said, the single syllable feeling heavy and foolish in my mouth. "Of course." I didn't realize. "Let me talk to Olivia," he'd mumbled, and the phone was muffled against his shirt. I heard the murmur of their voices, a quick, tense exchange. When he came back on the line, his voice had a new, determined brightness. "Okay, here's the plan. We'll come pick you up and drive you over to the motel." How does that sound? It sounded like the only option I had. An hour later, their sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Daniel got out and loaded my single suitcase into the trunk with a strained smile, while Olivia remained in the passenger seat, tapping at her phone. When I slid into the back, the smell of new leather and a faint, expensive perfume filled the space. "Hi, Olivia," I said softly. "Clara," she replied, not looking up from her screen. "What a mess. You really should have had them check those old pipes. Deferred maintenance always comes back to bite you." Her words, couched in practical advice, felt like a small, sharp stone aimed directly at me. It was my fault for living in an old building, my fault for not foreseeing the unpredictable. The drive was tense and largely silent. Daniel tried to fill the quiet with talk about his work, but his words trailed off into the uncomfortable stillness. I watched the familiar streets of my neighborhood give way to the unfamiliar, sterile boulevards leading to the newer, cheaper part of town where the motel was located. When Daniel finally pulled over, I realized we weren't in front of a building with a brightly lit sign. We were on a dimly lit side street, a block or 2 away from the motel's glowing marquee. "We'll just drop you here," Daniel said, avoiding my eyes in the rearview mirror. "It's a one-way street up ahead, and it's a pain to get back onto the main road." "Oh, all right." I reached for the door handle, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat of understanding. This wasn't about convenience. This was about distance. As I stepped onto the pavement, the evening air cool against my cheeks, Olivia finally turned to look at me. Her face was perfectly composed, her smile a thin, painted line. "I know your pension doesn't stretch very far, Clara," she said, reaching into her designer handbag. She pulled out a crisp $10 bill and held it out to me. "This should cover a nice cup of coffee and a pastry in the morning. Get yourself a little treat." Her voice was sweet, but the gesture was a masterpiece of casual cruelty. It wasn't a gift, it was an alms. It was a dismissal, a clear and precise valuation of my worth in their world. I was the charity case, the problem to be managed with a small, insignificant handout. I didn't take the money. My hand remained at my side. Daniel, seeing the impasse, took the bill from his wife's fingers and pressed it into my hand. "Just take it, Mom. Please." His eyes pleaded with me not to make a scene, not to complicate this simple, brutal transaction. I looked from my son's pained, cowardly face to his wife's impatient one. I closed my fingers around the bill. It felt like a brand. "Drive safe," I whispered. The door clicked shut and the SUV pulled away from the curb, its red taillights disappearing around the corner, leaving me alone on a strange street with the scent of their expensive perfume still lingering in the air. The $10 in my hand felt as heavy and as worthless as a stone. I didn't go straight to the motel. The thought of its sterile, lonely room was more than I could bear. Instead, I walked, my sensible shoes clicking softly on the cracked pavement. Each step was a measurement of the chasm that had just opened between my past and my present. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her son had just been paid off with $10. A small, brightly lit convenience store on the corner beckoned me, a beacon in the growing dusk. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and cleaning fluid. A young man with tired eyes sat behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. Taped to the plexiglass in front of him was a brightly colored sign, "State Lotto Jackpot, $47 million. You can't win if you don't play." I had never bought a lottery ticket in my life. Gambling, my practical mother used to say, was a tax on the foolish. But as I stood there, the $10 bill crumpled in my fist, I felt a strange and unfamiliar impulse. It wasn't defiance, not really. It was a quieter, more desperate feeling. It was the feeling of a woman who had just realized that the story she thought she was a main character in had relegated her to a footnote. What was the most foolish thing I could do right now? Pin my hopes on a 1 in a million chance. It seemed fitting. "One quick pick ticket, please," I heard myself say. My voice sounded foreign in the quiet store. The clerk barely looked up as he printed the slip of paper. He took my $10 bill and handed me back $8 in change and the ticket. I folded the small slip of paper and tucked it deep into my wallet, a secret wish, a tiny, silent rebellion against the cold reality of the evening. As I walked the final block to the motel, the lottery ticket felt like a seed. I had no expectation it would ever grow, but for the first time in a very long time, I had planted something just for myself. The week that followed was a masterclass in silence. I moved into a temporary furnished apartment arranged by my insurance company, a sterile, beige box that felt more like a waiting room than a home. My phone, usually buzzing with texts from Olivia about babysitting schedules or photos of the kids, remained quiet. Not a single call from Daniel to ask if I was settled. Not a text to see if I needed anything. The silence wasn't an oversight, it was a statement. They had dropped me off, both literally and figuratively, and were waiting for me to find my own way without bothering them. The lottery drawing was on a Wednesday night. I'd forgotten all about the ticket until I was tidying my purse and it fell out, a flimsy, forgotten wish. The news was on, the local anchor cheerfully announcing the winning numbers as a graphic displayed them on the screen. 4, 15, 22, 28, 36, and the bonus ball, 11. Out of a sense of weary curiosity, I unfolded the ticket. I smoothed it out on the coffee table, my librarian's habit of neatness taking over. I read the numbers on my ticket. 4, 15, 22, 28, 36. Bonus, 11. My breath caught in my throat. I read them again. And a third time. My hand began to shake, a tremor that started in my fingertips and spread up my arm. It couldn't be. Things like this were the stuff of fiction, of sensational headlines. They didn't happen to retired librarians in temporary apartments, nursing a hurt so deep it felt like a physical wound. I sat at the small dinette table for the rest of the night, the ticket laid out before me like a sacred text. $47 million. The number was so vast, so astronomical, it felt unreal. It was a sum that could rewrite not just my own story, but the stories of everyone I knew. And in the quiet, lonely hours before dawn, as the first gray light began to edge the horizon, a new feeling began to replace the shock. It was a feeling of calm, crystalline clarity. I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. The test of my resolve came, as I knew it would, in the form of a text message from Olivia a few days later. Clara, hope you're not still upset about the other night. Daniel feels just terrible. Things have just been so hectic here. Anyway, we were wondering if you might be free to watch the kids Saturday. We have a charity gala and our sitter canceled. The casual pivot from a non-apology to a request was breathtaking in its audacity. Daniel feels terrible. Not we feel terrible. We need you. I stared at the message, the words glowing on the screen. A week ago, I would have replied instantly, my heart leaping at the chance to be needed, to be welcomed back into the fold. I would have swallowed my hurt and said, of course. But the woman who read that text was not the same woman from a week ago. The woman from a week ago had $8 and a bruised heart. This woman had a secret worth $47 million. I typed a simple reply, I'm sorry, I have other plans. Her response was immediate. Plans? What plans? The unspoken addendum hung in the air. You don't have a life outside of us. I turned my phone off and placed it in a drawer. The silence that followed was my own choice. And it was wonderful. The next days were a blur of clandestine activity. I didn't go on a spending spree. I bought the same generic brand of tea, the same day-old bread from the bakery outlet. But I also made an appointment with a highly recommended financial advisor and a lawyer who specialized in estate planning. Their offices were downtown, in a glass tower that seemed to scrape the clouds. Take your time, Clara, said Mr. Hemlock, the lawyer, a kind man with silver hair and a reassuring smile. This is a marathon, not a sprint. The first and most important decision is who you tell and when. Money has a way of changing the emotional landscape. It can make deserts bloom, but it can also cause terrible floods. His words echoed in my mind as I thought of Daniel and Olivia. What would $47 million do to our already fractured landscape? The true test, the one that would tell me everything I needed to know, came from my own body. The stress of the past weeks, the flood, the move, the secret had coiled in my chest. One afternoon, while reading in my armchair, a sharp, terrifying pain radiated through my chest and down my left arm. It was real, a visceral, frightening clench that made the world go gray at the edges. After a few hours in the emergency room, a kind, overworked doctor told me it was a severe anxiety attack brought on by stress. My heart was fine, she assured me, but my body was sounding an alarm. You need to rest, she said, her expression serious. And you need to lean on your support system. Is there family who can help you for a few days? There was the question. The million-dollar question. Or, in my case, the $47 million one. From the hospital parking lot, my hands still unsteady, I called Daniel. Mom? What's up? I'm in the middle of a meeting, he answered, his voice impatient. Daniel, I'm at the hospital, I said, the tremor in my voice entirely genuine. I had chest pains. The doctor said it was stress, but I'm scared. The silence on his end was long and heavy. Oh. Well, are you okay now? He finally asked, his tone more inconvenienced than concerned. They said I need to rest. To not be alone for a few days. I was wondering if I could just stay on your couch? Just for a weekend? I wouldn't be any trouble. I could hear him sigh, a long, weary exhalation. Mom, this is a really bad time. Olivia is up for a promotion. She's working around the clock. The kids have their spring concert. The house is a disaster zone. We just can't handle any extra intensity right now. Intensity. That's what my fear was to him. An inconvenience. An intensity he couldn't handle. What if something else happens? I whispered. You'll be fine, Mom. You're tough. You always land on your feet. He said it like a compliment, but it felt like an abdication. I was tough so he didn't have to be. Look, I have to go. Talk later. The line went dead. I sat in my car, the sterile hospital smell clinging to me, and felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He had not once asked what the doctors had said, not once offered to come see me. He had simply assessed the situation and determined it was too much work. That evening, I received a call from Olivia. Her voice was syrupy with false sympathy. Clara, Daniel told me about your little scare. You poor thing. You know, you really need to learn some better coping mechanisms for your anxiety. Have you tried mindfulness? There are some wonderful apps. She was diagnosing me over the phone, prescribing a solution that required nothing of her. The doctor said I shouldn't be alone, I repeated, hating how weak my voice sounded. Oh, I know, she said brightly. And we were just talking about that. You know, with your health being so precarious now, living alone in that old building just doesn't seem safe. We were looking into this lovely place, Willow Creek Gardens. It's an assisted living community. They have nurses on staff, organized activities. It would be such a load off our minds to know you were being professionally cared for. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just refusing to help. She was using my moment of vulnerability as an opportunity to solve the long-term problem of me. She was trying to warehouse me. It's very affordable, even on your pension, she continued, her voice warming with enthusiasm. And we could visit. Whenever our schedules line up, of course. I saw my future laid out in her cheerful, pragmatic words, a small room in a facility, monthly visits if I was lucky, my life reduced to a line item on their budget of time and energy. I have to go, Olivia, I said, my throat tight. Of course, dear. You rest up. And really think about it. It's for the best. After I hung up, I didn't cry. The capacity for those kinds of tears seemed to have dried up. Instead, I felt a strange, cold resolve settle over me. The questions I'd been asking myself had been answered. This wasn't a family fractured by a misunderstanding. This was a family that had already discarded me. My son and his wife weren't just neglectful, they were actively trying to manage me out of their lives. I opened my laptop and began to type. Not a search for mindfulness apps or assisted living facilities, but an email to Mr. Hemlock, my lawyer. Subject: urgent, revision of estate plans. I knew now, with absolute certainty, what I had to do. They had shown me exactly who they were. It was time I believed them. The invitation for dinner arrived 3 weeks later, delivered via a phone call from Olivia, her voice effervescent with a warmth I now recognized as tactical. Clara, we were just thinking, it's been far too long. We'd love to have you over for a proper family dinner this Sunday. Just us. Just us. The phrase was meant to sound intimate and inclusive, but I knew it was a stage setting. After my health scare and their subsequent suggestions, a wall of polite, impenetrable silence had risen between us. This dinner was not a peace offering, it was a campaign. That's lovely of you, Olivia, I said, my own voice calm and measured. Wonderful. And would you be a dear and make your lemon meringue pie? Daniel has been craving it. Oh, and if you're stopping by the Gilded Crust, could you pick up a loaf of their sourdough? The kids devour it. Even the invitation came with an invoice. My presence was conditional on my contribution. On Sunday evening, I stood on their perfectly manicured front porch, holding the pie in one hand and a bag with the expensive bread in the other. Through the large picture window, I could see the tableau of a perfect family, Daniel laughing with Leo on the plush rug, Sophie showing Olivia a drawing, soft lighting glinting off wine glasses. It was a scene from a magazine, and I was the visitor from a different, less glossy world. Olivia opened the door, dressed in a cream-colored cashmere sweater that likely cost more than my monthly utility bills. Clara, you made it. Come in, come in. The house smelled of roasting chicken and something floral and expensive. Dinner was a performance of domestic bliss. Daniel was attentive, refilling my water glass and asking about my book club. Olivia complimented my pie effusively. The children, bless their innocent hearts, were genuinely happy to see me, showering me with hugs and stories about school. For a few brief moments, I allowed myself to sink into the illusion, to pretend that this was real. The charade ended, as I knew it would, over coffee. Daniel cleared his throat, setting his cup down with a deliberate click. He shared a meaningful look with Olivia. "Mom," he began, his tone carefully gentle. "Olivia and I have been doing a lot of thinking since your episode. We're worried about you, Clara," Olivia chimed in, her face a mask of loving concern. "Deeply worried. That scare was a wake-up call for all of us. It made us realize that your current living situation just isn't sustainable. It's not safe for you to be alone." I took a slow sip of my coffee, its warmth doing nothing to quell the chill inside me. "And what solution have you come up with?" Olivia's face brightened. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. "We've done some research on Willow Creek Gardens. It's a wonderful community. More like a resort than a home, really. They have a pool, art classes, gourmet meal plans, and a full medical staff on site, 24/7. It would give us such peace of mind. It would take the pressure off of all of us," Daniel added, his relief almost palpable. "We wouldn't have to worry every time the phone rings. We wouldn't have to worry." The truth of their motivation, stark and selfish, lay exposed on the polished dining room table. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about theirs. "And what about my grandchildren?" I asked, my voice steady. "When would I see Sophie and Leo?" Olivia and Daniel exchanged another look, this one more hesitant. "Well, that's another thing," Olivia said slowly, choosing her words with care. "We think it would be best if the visits were a bit more structured. You've been very emotional lately, Clara. It's confusing for the children when Grandma is upset. We think it would be healthier for them to see you when you're feeling your best, perhaps on their scheduled visiting days." Supervised visits. With my own grandchildren. They were subtly, expertly, painting me as unstable, a potential emotional hazard to the children I had helped raise. The quiet librarian, the reliable babysitter, had been recast as the volatile, needy matriarch who needed to be managed and contained for the good of the family. "So, you are suggesting I move into an institution," I stated, stripping away their euphemistic language, "where my contact with my own family will be limited and supervised." "It's the most loving thing to do for everyone," Daniel insisted, his jaw tight. "They have a small waiting list, but Olivia spoke with the director, and if we put a deposit down this week, a studio apartment could be available by next month." They had already spoken to the director. Place me on a waiting list in their minds. The decision had been made long before the pie was even out of the oven. This dinner was not a discussion, it was a notification of my own disposal. I looked at their earnest, determined faces. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing, the sensible thing. They had reasoned their way to a solution that erased their guilt and solved the problem of me. "I see," I said softly. I placed my napkin on the table and rose. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" In the cool marble of their guest bathroom, I stared at my reflection. I saw a 68-year-old woman in a simple navy dress, her face etched with a sadness that had been years in the making. But beneath the sadness, I saw something else, too. A flicker of strength. The quiet resolve of a woman who had spent a lifetime reading stories and knew, with absolute certainty, that this was not how hers was going to end. When I returned to the dining room, they were looking at me with expectant, hopeful expressions, as if a few moments of quiet reflection would surely make me see the flawless logic of their plan. I sat down, but I didn't reach for my coffee cup. Instead, I reached into my handbag. "You're right," I said, my voice clear and calm in the suddenly silent room. "You have given me a great deal to think about. And I've made a decision about my future." "Oh, wonderful!" Olivia exclaimed, clapping her hands together softly. "I know you'll be so happy there." "No, not that decision," I said. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse and placed it gently on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. It was a photocopy of the lottery ticket. "My decision is about this." Daniel picked it up, a frown creasing his brow. "What is this, Mom?" "A lottery ticket. The one I bought the night you left me on the side of the road with $10 for coffee," I said. "The winning numbers for the state lotto were announced 3 weeks ago. Perhaps you could look them up." I watched as a flicker of confusion, then dawning horror, moved across my son's face. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers tapping urgently on the screen. I saw his eyes widen, saw the color drain from his face as he compared the numbers on his phone to the paper in his hand. He looked up at me, his mouth slightly agape. For the first time that night, he looked truly speechless. $47 million, I said, finishing his thought for him. I let the words hang in the air, a silence more profound than any I had ever known in my library. Olivia snatched the paper from Daniel's limp grasp, her eyes darting between the ticket and the phone, her perfectly constructed composure shattering like fine china. You won?" she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I did," I said. Then I reached into my handbag again. And that, as you said, was a wake-up call. It made me realize I needed to make some serious changes to my estate planning. I pulled out a slim file folder and opened it on the table. "This," I said, tapping a document, "is a copy of my new will. Sophie and Leo will have a trust for their education. The rest, the vast majority, will be endowed to create a foundation that provides legal and financial support for elderly individuals who are being pressured into unwanted living situations by their families." Olivia made a small, strangled sound. Daniel just stared, his face a pale mask of shock. "And this," I continued, sliding another paper across the table, "is an itemized accounting I've been working on. It's a list of every major expense I covered for you over the years. The down payment on this house. The loan for your first car, Daniel. The family vacations to Disney World. The private school tuition when Olivia was laid off. With a very modest interest rate applied, it comes to," I paused, letting them read the number at the bottom of the page. $312,000, Daniel read aloud, his voice hollow. "I'm not asking for it back," I said gently. "Consider it a final gift. But I wanted you to see the numbers. I wanted you to understand the financial value of the intensity and emotionalism you find so difficult to be around." I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate. The illusion of the perfect family dinner was irrevocably shattered, and all that remained was the cold, hard truth. "We love you, Mom," Daniel whispered, his eyes welling with tears. It was the desperate plea of a man who had just realized he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. "I know you believe that, Daniel," I said, and my heart ached with a deep, ancient sorrow for the boy he used to be and the man he had become. "But your love comes with conditions I am no longer willing to meet. You want a mother who is convenient, quiet, and requires nothing of you. I am done trying to shrink myself to fit into that role." I walked toward the front door, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape as Olivia stood up. "Clara, wait. We can fix this. We can do better. We promise." I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at them one last time, standing together in their beautiful home, their faces a mixture of panic and desperate regret. "Some things, once broken, can't be fixed," I said softly. "They can only be let go. You wanted to give me a new life at Willow Creek Gardens. And in a way you have. You've given me a new life, free from the weight of your expectations. Thank you for that." I opened the door and stepped out into the cool, clean night air. I didn't look back. As I drove away, my phone began to ring, Daniel's name flashing on the screen. Then Olivia's. Then Daniel's again. I pulled over to the side of the road, turned the phone off completely, and dropped it onto the passenger seat. The silence that filled my car was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. It was the sound of my own story, finally, beginning. 2 years have passed since that night. I did not move into a mansion or buy a yacht. The lottery winnings did not transform me into a different person. They simply gave me the resources to become the person I was always meant to be. I live now in a small cottage in Havenwood, a town nestled in the foothills of the Colorado Mountains. My home is filled with books, light, and the scent of the pine trees that surround it. My garden is my pride and joy, a riot of lavender, rambling roses, and sturdy, sun-warmed tomatoes. I have a friend, Helen, a retired art teacher who lives down the road. We drink coffee on my porch in the mornings and wine in the evenings, and our conversations are filled with the easy, unburdened laughter of two women who have nothing to prove. The foundation I established is thriving. We've helped dozens of seniors navigate the complex and often predatory system of elder care, ensuring their voices are heard and their rights are protected. My work there has given me a purpose far greater than I ever found cataloging books. It's the work of helping people write their own final chapters with dignity and choice. I hear from my grandchildren. Sophie, who is 11 now, emails me once a week. She tells me about her life, her friends, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Her messages are a precious, fragile bridge across the distance I had to create. I answer each one, telling her about my garden, the deer that visit my yard, the books I am reading. I send her gifts for her birthday and Christmas, not extravagant ones, but thoughtful tokens that say, I see you. I love you. I never speak ill of her parents. I want her to have the freedom to love them without conflict, a grace they were never willing to extend to me. I have not spoken to Daniel or Olivia since that night. Their frantic attempts to contact me tapered off after a few months, replaced by a stony, wounded silence. I know, through my lawyer, that they have not contested my new will. Perhaps, in the end, they understood. Or perhaps they simply knew it was a fight they could not win. Sometimes, on a quiet evening when the mountain air is still and the sky is ablaze with stars, I think of them. I feel a pang of sorrow not for what I lost, but for what they were never able to have, a relationship unburdened by transaction, a love not measured by convenience. The lottery ticket gave me financial freedom, but the true prize was something far more valuable. It was the permission I finally gave myself to walk away from a story where I was unloved and unvalued. It was the courage to pick up a pen and write a new one, a story filled with quiet joy, authentic connection, and the profound peace of a woman who is, at long last, truly home. And I have learned that sometimes, the richest life is not the one with the most in it, but the one where you have let go of everything that was holding you down.